Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. I know there's a few people still joining, but as I said, we are delighted to have you on board. My name is Lynn Savage. I'm National Development Manager with Ladies Football, and I'm joined tonight with William Harmon, who's our National Development Officer. William, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi everyone, William Harmon, National Development Officer with remit for Coach Ed. Looking forward to tonight, looking forward to sharing ideas and thoughts. So I'll talk to you shortly. Thank you.
So you're getting a good mix of accents from Loud to Kerry tonight, so we'll apologise in advance going from one to the other. Just some housekeeping, if you do want to ask a question at any stage during it, there's a Q&A function. There will be times where we'll ask you to type something in the chat, so feel free to put it in there also. And if you can't hear anything or speak at any stage, we just advise you leave the webinar and come back in. Just sometimes the connection might drop. So we're going to get started. Tonight's topic is team building on and off the pitch. And I suppose before we start, we're going to keep this very simple, very practical. So all the theoretical stuff can be read into, but we want stuff that you can actually go off and do with your teams, which I think is really, really important. So we're going to focus on what you can do on the pitch, but also off the pitch, and also multiple ages. We know from the signing up process, we have every age from maybe nursery level through to adults. So we'll try as much as possible that it's engaging for everybody across the board. So this evening we look at what is a high performing team, and you might be scared of that going, geez, I'm here with my under eights and what are you saying about a high performing team? But a high performing team is a team who reaches their potential. So it's not, a high performing team doesn't necessarily mean an elite team or an Olympic team or an Ireland champions. And a high performing team is a team who reaches their potential, and that includes from a team bonding perspective, which we're going to look at tonight. So as you look at numerous teams, just because they win a championship, maybe you go back and look at them next year and they've lost a load of players. So would you call that a high performing team versus a team maybe who didn't win anything, but every single one of their players is back next year? So what we look as a high performing team is going to look a little bit different. We look at team bonding and the plan. So how can we help you out on that? And then next steps, which really is the power of positivity. And that step I'll be handing over to William, and anyone who's been in a webinar with William knows there's nobody more positive than William Harmon, so he'll drive you through that section as well. So just before we get started, you'll see in the chat function there, I want you just to type in a few words that you think of when you see the word team. What's a few words that you think of when you see that word? So just in the chat, fire them in there, and William's going to call some of them out.
Yeah, and why people come in there, you know, Lynn, I'm really looking forward to sharing all practical ideas. So the idea of, I suppose, being united and together is coming up there, and that idea of being with their friends, and I suppose it's probably very in line with the research that's coming out too, working together. It's more than one person and that collective effort. And I suppose the importance of bonding, everybody working together, a togetherness. And I like the idea of, you know, together. This is something not in isolation. It's probably quite across the board in your team and as a club as well. Working together to achieve more. Very good. A community setup. Very excellent. The cohesion, the squad, and everybody's motivated. So hopefully tonight, Lynn, you know, the ideas we give people will help them enhance the already good work that's been done. There's no iron team. That's a very good one. Yeah, well done. Respect. And look, we'll go through all those later on. So hopefully now we can give you a bit more ideas on those. And ever evolving, which is good too, because coaching's always changing into really. So yeah, excellent. So 147 people there, Lynn, came back fairly fast. So I think we can move it on. But the idea of unity and everybody working to a common goal, I think is something that's coming across very much.
That's huge. And I suppose the reason we started with that is, obviously this is part of our coach education series, and a lot of our topics are around maybe the skills of the game or the tactics and everything else. But actually what we're really stressing is having your team working together. And as William said, that cohesion, that's what's the nuts and bolts of bringing all this together. So you can have your pitch looking brilliant with cones and everything else, but if the team aren't actually working together, well then it can be a waste of time for some. So we really want to look at the team bonding aspect tonight. So I suppose a question that we're asking you is, are teams regularly like this? So you can see all the cogs working together. If one of them cogs is loose, the whole thing would fall apart. So everything's perfect. And when that was manufactured, it was in it. So are teams like this, or are they more like this? And I think the majority of us will say it's more like the Rapids. So no matter, and especially in 2020 when COVID-19 hit us, we definitely hit a few Rapids. So it's probably more applicable than ever. So all the good plans you have at the start of the year, it takes maybe one player to drop off or something to happen, or a loss of a game, or maybe a one that you didn't expect. All of a sudden you're in a different rapid to what you actually set off on. So for a lot of teams, it's very much like the rapids, and that's where it can be a challenge on coaches, because if it was just able to plan a nice straight route through to the end of the year, you'd be flying. But as coaches, the more cohesive your team is, the less impact those rapids will have on your team. And I suppose that's the reason we're showing the slide that we're showing. So if you can keep building cohesion and build it into your plan, well then the rapids can keep hitting you, but you'll still plow on towards it. So that's really, really important.
I think that's a good point, Lynn, actually, and something that we probably come across tonight is that idea of when you've kind of thought about something and when you kind of plan, whatever is thrown at you, you'll be able to overcome it. You know, and I think hopefully that'll come through the webinar tonight, Lynn. I think it's a very good point you made. Yeah.
So we'll try and veer you away from the rapids over the next less than an hour, we promise you, but we'll veer you away from them. So suppose just for yourselves, and we don't need you, this is just for you to think for a minute to yourself. Can you think of a high performing team you know? And now remember what we defined a high performing team as a few minutes ago. So it's not necessarily the All-Ireland champions or the world champions. A high performing team is a team who's really reached their potential. So have they kept all their players? Have they achieved something that was unique? So think of that high performing team you know. And then when you are thinking of them, what makes them a high performing team? And like, you can free to fire a few in the chat there, no problem. But it's really just to get you thinking for a second of that high performing team and what makes it, because we want you to think a little bit differently at the end, because a lot of the times we do all the planning of, okay, but this is how we're going to win the championship this year. And don't get me wrong, the people who work on all the team bonding and stuff will probably still get there. They'll probably still win the championship, etc. But it's not the be all or end all, is what we're trying to say, is that you have a real cohesive team, particularly with females, because the social aspect, feeling part of something, is massive. And you've seen that in all the research, and William will touch on that later on as well. So for your high performing team, some of the reasons as to why they are. So William, I'm not sure if anything did come in there just before we move on up this one.
I think what came in there was, that strength of squad. And I think the lady said here, the Irish hockey team there developed over the years, seem to enjoy, that's it, that's the essence of it. Enjoy coming down to play for you. Enjoy coming down to play with their friends. That enjoyment factor. And that's excellent, even with the All Blacks. They always seem to be enjoying it. Even I watched there with Liverpool and stuff, and all the high-performing teams outside of ladies football, they all just seem to love playing for each other and just love playing the game. And probably they might have all those other pressures, but how do you get to that element whereby I just want to go out and play, and how do we achieve that? So, and I think even Limerick at the weekend there, the skill and everything from the Limerick hurlers, but they enjoy what they do. And when you enjoy what you do, you're more likely to achieve what you want to achieve. Yeah.
And I think the Irish hockey team was a great example there too, because I know the fact that we could see them having the crack on the side of the road or trains and going here, there and everywhere, we all bought into them, because we if we're being honest on this, how many of us knew the rules of hockey or the shootout or anything else, yet we were glued to our screens for the time it was on, because we bought into that team and the enjoyment they were having. So that's what we're hoping to help you with tonight, is to really get that enjoyment in your team. So cohesion, it's a massive role. It's really decisive in every team, because it has a great influence on motivation. So if you're feeling together, your motivation's higher, and thus on the success of the team. And like, by success, again, think of all those things that we're measuring as success. For some, it can be something that's actually extrinsic. It can be intrinsic to the team. It can be, especially with, I know we have quite a few coaches with teenage players on the call tonight. So we know how hard it is to hold on to the teenagers. So if you're looking in 2 years' time, 4 years' time, and you're still having them, that's a massive success, considering the dropout there is, not in ladies football alone, but in sport in general. So cohesion will really play an important role in ensuring that all that happens.
I think someone in the chat there mentioned about the importance of winning, and that is important. Like, I suppose it's important to win every now and then. But if you and we'll talk about later on in terms of your outcomes and what you're striving for, but if players keep enjoying themselves, and you know what, they're probably losing a few games, but they can see they're getting better and improving as a group. And then when they win that game, it's like, it might be just one game of the year, but it's real elation, really. So that it's different kind of, feeling towards that. But it's just, how do we get there in terms of what do we need to do to kind of build that cohesion so we can achieve those feelings and those culture. Yeah. Well
exactly. Yeah. So there's loads of measured things, and don't get me wrong, as we go through it, as you said, they'll want to win as well, but they'll want to enjoy it is a big thing in relation to it. So for the team bonding, these are just 4 areas that we're going to kind of cover along a few different things as we go through tonight. But the message from you as the coach, but also from the leaders of your team, from your captains, that's a huge thing in relation to the team bonding, because it gets belief from all the other members. So if you're saying something and you really don't believe in it, they'll see straight through it. So from team bonding, you've really got to believe in the message that you're doing, that you're giving them achievement, you're giving them hope, and also recognizing the achievements, however minimal they are. Getting to know each other. And we're going to give you loads of things tonight as to how your players can get to know each other. Not just they kick with their left foot, they hand pass with their right hand. So it's not just on the skills, it's actually getting to know each other as people is a big thing. The team values. So what values do you have in place for your team? And how do you get your players to buy into this? And by the way, this is right down to the under-8s turning up for training on time. So it's not just the adults. It's your values that you have regardless of your team. And William is an excellent piece around how you can do that with all age groups across the way. And then the individual strengths and positive traits. There'd be nothing worse, and I know even from teams I was involved with, both playing and coaching, where you find out a few years later of some strength that somebody had that we actually didn't use. So how do we find out about those strengths and traits when we have them? And I know from a lot of coaches they'll say you might know the strongest player skill-wise or strength-wise in your team, but actually team bonding-wise, who's the player that knits the whole team together? And that's really important person to have in your team as well. And they might not necessarily be the person who can kick every score or hand pass every pass, but they are essential in relation to your team. So that's what we're going to look at. I know from a psychological safety point of view, a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. That's really important. So your team has to feel safe. It has to be a safe environment. So that culture, that values that you have in it, that it's okay for me to speak up, and that I won't feel, and regardless of which player I am on that team, that we all feel equal, that we can do it. And a team climate characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect, in which people are comfortable being themselves. And we've seen from all the research, the most important person to a player is their teammate. So the most influential to a player is their teammate. The person who stops them from dropping off, their teammate. The person who gets them started, their teammate. So if they're not trusting each other and building a mutual respect and that bonding, well then straight away there's some of those being knocked off. So how do we actually make sure that we're getting these? That's really what tonight's going to focus on.
And also, I suppose, there then we talk about, and I saw in the chat prior to asking the questions about, I suppose, disruptive behaviour and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. But I just go back to the point you made in that, I suppose, girls or females don't like to be criticised or probably even given good comments in front of the group. So it's what is acceptable to the group. So how do we get those acceptable behaviours where the group will agree them and where it's acceptable, where the group will call each other out? I think that's a very, very powerful thing to try and achieve. And it's something that we'll show later on in terms of 1 or 2 little things you can do. But that acceptable behaviour whereby, everybody kind of, is, kind of calling each other out if people are stepping out of line, even in that case,
Yeah, and that's huge. And I think that's a bit like it's saying in the first there, the spoken and unspoken values. So it's been able to know what those are. What is the norms for the team? How do we get them to buy into it? As I said, you might look at some of these and say, well, I'm with an under 14 team at the minute. How does that fit in? Like, these are just words, but you can put this into terminology to match your team. So the nature of relationships, how are we going to chat to each other? How do we expect each other? How do you expect to chat to each other? The collective behavior. So if we're all going to be here in time, or we've an agreed thing that we come 10 minutes early and have all the chats that we want because it's part of our team. So that's the collective behavior that you're having. So put simply, it's how individuals show up and what they do each day. And I know from a high performing team, we have Dublin up there at the minute, but if you watch a lot of interviews of whether it be county or club or anything, they will talk about it's brilliant about the success and they've loved it. But especially when they retire, what do they miss most? Their teammates. And that's because of that bond that you as coaches have created. Because if you didn't allow that environment to happen, well then the players wouldn't have had the time to do it. So that's where the team culture is really, really important. And on the culture, I know you might have been looking at this video link when we sent it to you going, what has this got to do with ladies football? And William did promise me he'd laugh away in the background when we got to this. But there was a reason we threw it out there. It's completely non-sport related for a start, but it was something we've seen at a few workshops. And for anyone who didn't get a chance to watch it, there is an opportunity for you to watch it afterwards. But even for people who did watch it, can go back and look at it. But really it's a story from in the early 1900s in relation to the race to the South Pole. So nobody had actually got to the South Pole. And there was two explorers, which were Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott. Roald Amundsen was Norwegian, Robert Falcon Scott was British, and they both wanted to be the first to get to the South Pole. So it's very much a story around it. And I suppose there's a few different things. The reason that we threw it out there, the moral of the story at the end is that the Norwegians won. They got there, but they also got back safely. For the British team, they got there. It was a massive achievement, but unfortunately, none of them made it back after it. So between all the trials and tribulations, the snow, the equipment, the food, everything that had to do with it just let them down. So the reason we sent it to you was, looking, you're the leader of your team. So what was the mindset of the teams? And if you watch that little video, you'll see that the Norwegian team were very confident before the set off. They had everything in place. They went out early and dropped food at different points along it and came back. They spent weeks preparing for it. They picked a different point to start their journey compared to everyone else who'd ever tried to go to the South Pole. So this team was very trusting in their leader. They knew that leader had everything in place and they were confident. For Scott's team, there was doubt because they were starting on the same route that everyone else had gone on and never made it. So there was extreme doubt. And I suppose the big difference between the two leaders was, one was very process focused. So for Amundsen, he really looked at the whole thing of how he was going to get there and get back, versus Scott, who was very outcome focused. We're just going to get to that point and back, but not really thinking of all the things. The trust created and enhanced was really created by the leader. So by the coach in our case, that's how the trust was created. Knew what everyone's strength was, played to those strengths, and made sure they knew what their role was. Even around the equipment. So if you look for for Scott's team, they had motorized sleds, which straight away in the weather that was there, they didn't even make it. Like, out of the ships and everything else, they were gone. The horses that they were going to use were never going to survive in the snow. So the horses had died very early. They had very few dogs, which were the only things that were actually going to survive, versus Amundsen's team, which just had the sleigh dogs and sleighs that he knew was going to make it. Now, from us being from Ireland as well, we know the Norwegians probably were more used to the snow than the British, so they had a bit of a step ahead there. But the team's purpose was very much the same. They both wanted to reach the potential, but there was a very difference in what each team member was going to have to do. For Scott's team, they were going to have to drag equipment themselves. They were going to waste energy. They were going to get tired. They had less food. They had no food drops on. Versus the Norwegians, who, when they set off, knew everything's fine. We have our food drops. The dogs are going to do all the work. We're going to go with it. It was very clear, that confidence that was there. And how did they respond to the setbacks and play to each other's strengths? Literally, for Scott's team, they didn't have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. As they lost the motorized sleds, as they lost the horses, they literally had to think on their feet until eventually they were carrying sleds. And even when they got to the flag, to see the Norwegians had already been there, can you imagine what their mindset was? And the trust that they had in their leader must have been completely gone, to not alone get there last, but to think we have to go the whole way back. So the difference in the two leaders. So how did they focus on what was most important to ensure success? For Amundsen, he focused on the whole process. For you, for your team, how are we going to get to the end? Yes, you're going to have to look at your trainings and your matches, but what about how you're going to bond that team? What about the whole process of how you're going to make it to the end of the year? That is so important. How are you going to know the strengths of each of your team members, so that if one thing slips or one player knocks down, you have another one able to come into their place? You have the right environment to make them grow, because that's a big thing that let down Scott, in that he didn't predict all the other stuff that was coming up. So yes, we may have looked a bit mad by sending you the link to the race to the South Pole, But we did want you to think a bit differently because of the slide that we have shown earlier, that message from the leader. So Amundsen fully believed in what he was doing. He knew when to take off. He knew what needed to be planned. He didn't let his fellow explorers go and mix. He just wanted to keep extremely focused on what it was. He knew all his fellow explorers, what the strengths were, where were they going to fit into the team. He only took 5. So like, it's not as if there was this massive team. The team values were clearly there, and then knew the individual strengths and positive traits. So that was very much about Scott and Amundsen. We promise you the rest of it's going to be very focused on sport.
You just came in there, Lynn, and a lady came in there. It all makes sense now, and I have no problem saying I agree. I actually listened to it myself. Then Lynn went through to me, and now it makes sense. So I think, Lynn, you did a good job in explaining it. So, but I would definitely recommend people to go back and listen to it now if they haven't, because I think there's a lot of very good key learning points in that.
There is, and we just wanted to make you think a little bit different, because we always come on to these and we see all our coaches that we know, but really it makes us think differently in that if we don't match up the right people, if we don't actually take out the values of people, we're going to lose them. So how do we make sure that? But also, if we really don't believe in the end of the journey, they'll see it and they won't believe in it themselves. So it's very, very important that we get that team bonding and get the journey. And this really says it all. Whenever you see a man on top of the mountain, you can be sure he didn't fall there. Okay, so there was a lot of planning, preparation, there was people in it, there was everything, there was a process as to how that was going to get there. So think of that for your team for the coming year. Whatever your achievements want to be, as I said, that can be anything. It's different for every team, for every age group. What's the process to get you there? And what's going to be the checkpoints? So that's going to be the big thing in relation to this, that you're actually going to get the checkpoints. And what we're hoping to do for the rest of this, we're not going to throw you up on mountains, and we're not going to send you to the South Pole. We're going to give you loads of practical stuff now, but we just want to make you think a little bit differently. So the practical stuff will help you if you were with your team tonight, which unfortunately with COVID's not happening with many of us, but it would really make a difference in relation to your team bonding. So this is the plan. So how are we actually going to do it? So for yourselves, we have a few little polls. So we're going to put up a poll now in a second. Can high-performing teams, and remember, high-performing teams, we mean the team that achieves where they need to go to their potential, get to know each other and discover individual strengths and traits solely on the pitch. So I'm going to put up a poll, and we just want you there. It should appear on your screen. If you just want to say yes or no.
I think, Lynn, it's a big unanimous no. And we're going to show you actually a few things that we can do on the pitch now in a few minutes as well. But yeah, Lynn, it's a definite no. Now 3% said yes, so that can be done, yeah, too. Like, and I suppose what I mean by that is that, I suppose if you start winning, you're winning regularly, then obviously it builds confidence and builds, so I can see that point of view as well.
Yeah, perfect. And then the second question we have there for you. How many of you have an annual team bonding for your team? Now, before I put up the poll, what we mean by that is, and I was involved in coaching myself, where you had all the dates that you're going to train, you had all the dates you were going to have matches, but actually, did you build in the team bonding? And by that, we don't mean a weekend away. That might be something, but actually it could be, well, in this session, we're going to have a bit of crack, so we'll pencil this in. So how do you actually, how many of you have actually included team bonding in relation to it? So hopefully there's a poll going to come up again. Just looking. We'll just get you actually to put this one in the chat, because for some reason it's going to come up with the same question again. We actually would throw it up the same question. You can just click yes or no on this one. Yeah, so don't worry about the question.
And this is the one now whereby you're actually sitting down going, do you know what? It's a quiet week this week now. We'll do some, we just have a bit of crack at this session. Even that simplistic in terms of thinking that way. So it's interesting, Lynn, good for you actually, nearly 60%. So 2/3 nearly say they do think about that, but 1/3 at the moment think, they probably don't do enough of that. So it's kind of like 2/3 for and 1/3 against, which is interesting, which is good. It's good to hear that coaches do think about that.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. And for those who say no, that's fine. And that's not to say you don't do any team bonding. Like loads of coaches will say, oh, do you know what? Maybe the team was down, or if a big game coming up, we'll do something. So it's just now, how do you build that into your plan is what we're going to look at over the next few slides. So there's a few key stages. So some of the key stages pre-season, particularly for new members coming into your team. it's great to be able to do a few activities. And I'm not going to talk about what those are because they're coming up, but getting the new members in your team bonded into it. And that can be new members into your club in general, or even maybe if minors have moved on to the senior team, or under 14s, under 16. So it's your team in general. To start a competition, it can be a real vulnerable time for players. Am I going to get picked? Am I even going to feature anywhere near the starting 15? So that start of competition can be vulnerable. After league, and I know competitions differ from county to county, but a lot of the times there's leagues or other competitions played before the championship. So you have that fear of, okay, I got to play a few games during the league, but am I going to get to play in this? And I know it differs for underage and stuff, but these are just key stages where players really need a little bit of a confidence boost and to feel back part of it. During championship, things can get so, like, down the line, it's all about the championship, and rightly so, but don't lose track of the fun pit. Like, that's not to say you have to do a whole session on this, but maybe there's 10 minutes at the start or 10 minutes at the end where you throw in some little fun things. So you'll see from what the slides come up, there can be little short things or something long, but it's a key time to do it. The end of season, always celebrate your achievements, no matter what they are, and make sure you celebrate it. And then special occasions, events. So things like having a birthday list. If there's sports events coming up, maybe it's Olympics or a World Cup, is there something you can actually brand around it? We'll give you a few examples of that as well. So these are just some of the key stages. Currently, we look a lot at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats for teams, and probably more so on the strengths and weaknesses in a lot of cases. Whereas if we actually looked at the opportunities, we could have some little gems on the team that could be bringing our team to a whole new level. Some of the threats, and I know it come up in a few of the things maybe around like how do you deal with friction between players, etc. But if you can get as much cohesion as possible built, but then you have less of that friction can actually start to creep in. So a lot of clarity and clear communication, which William will talk about, will bring from that. So a lot of the times we've done team bonding, we've focused on these. But the activities we're going to show you now, you can actually find out all of these, but by doing a bit of fun activities, you can find out what were the strengths of your team, what were the weaknesses. Geez, there's a leader I didn't even know we had because they came to the fore in the middle of all this. So that's what we're hoping to show you just through the next few slides in relation to activities. So I'm going to hand you over to the Kerry man, who's going to take you through some of the role of the coach.
Yeah, so let's look at a few strategies now. And I suppose we're going to look at in training, and we're going to look in matches, and we're going to look at outside of all that. And I just want to stress, these are things that we didn't get from books, myself and Lynn. We're both coaches ourselves. We both tried everything we put up here. We've tried it. We tried it ourselves. It worked for some teams. It didn't work for others. It might work for you. It mightn't work. But I suppose that what I'm trying to say here is don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to try things and to keep that. But let's go back to you, the coach, us as the coaches. The role we play in this is very important. And the big thing I would say is to lead by example and be authentic. Be yourself. Don't be trying to be anybody else, because Lynn had a very good point earlier on. Players will see through that if you're trying to be someone else or you're there for a different reason or a different agenda. Practice what you preach. And I always say, guys, team bonding is not in isolation. It's a continuous thing. Every time you engage your players, you're developing a team ethic, bonding, cohesion. So build that trust. So practice what you preach. So if you say to players, guys, I'm going to give you all game time, or I'm going to do this, then you need to follow through on that, because that builds that unity and that trust in you as a leader. And that's something I probably learned myself as a coach, that, you know what, if you say something, you need to follow through on it. Clear expectations. So this is like, you know, talking about the Explorer. This is where we want to go. And, you know, I believe we can get here as a group. So have that clarity around that. But how do we achieve that? And how do we get around that? And we'll show you a few ideas. Identify individual groups, goals and individual. And the research says in ladies football that girls stay involved because they want to improve and develop and get better. That's one of the main reasons. I want to know, am I getting better? And the simple goals could really help with that. Simple goal setting. So you can give evidence to say, okay, guys, we didn't achieve our goal this year. We only won 4 out of 7 matches, but look how we improved. But you need to have evidence to support that, okay? But you need to identify what type of environment you want to work in. And that goes back to the acceptable behaviors by the group, because the group is very important. The teammates are very important. How will we treat each other as a team? What are our values? And having that holistic approach. There's a lot of players today, guys, they're working, they're traveling. You've got to understand there's more to it than just the football game. And we just seen our own research in ladies football. There's so much going on in girls' lives or players' lives. We need to understand that ladies football is just one aspect of the bigger picture. So understanding the player is key. So here's a few strategies we use. And I have no problem saying, I'll tell you which ones worked or didn't work. But anyway, I always believe in the main thing I would say tonight is your actions will develop unity. How you go about yourself in every session, in every game, on the pitch, off the pitch, will develop unity. You can do all the greatest and spend all the biggest money you want in all the team building you want, no problem. But how you go about your business and engage your players is probably more powerful than spending thousands on a team bonding day. That's just my thoughts on that. So then if we want to move it on, so here, let's look a few ideas in training. So what have we done as coaches? Think about the planning. We always think about when we're planning a session, what drills do we need to do? Say tactical drills we need to do, or physical what we need to do. But we seem to forget about the psychosocial. So in your session planning, do you plan what questions will you ask your players? Do you plan how they're going to work in groups? You know, so we have girls, new girls here, and the research shows that girls actually, in particular the shy girls, they work better in small groups. So you need to think about that. So in my planning, I actually write down what players go into what groups. So I know, okay, she'll develop this girl, she'll support this girl, you know, she'll be able to join. So just think about that. Do we think about that enough? Do we plan it? Do we actually write down the questions we're going to ask? So to get the players involved in the process. Do we acknowledge players enough? A simple hello as they come in the kit. Or are we running around headless trying to put cones out on the pitch? And, you know, why not be there 20, 25 minutes early? Put all the cones out, whatever you need to do. But then use that 20 minutes to just engage with players, build that connection. How are you today? I know you had an exam. How did you get on with that? That builds that unity you can't make up. Unstructured chat. We know players like to chat. In particular, female players like to chat. So, yeah, promote it. Promote it. I know a lot of coaches go, come on, they wreck my head. They always want to talk. Well, okay, structure that. Okay, lads, we train 7:30, but you know, for the first 15 minutes, come early and we'll have a chat. Have a chat about your day, whatever you want to do. And it's good for you to build that as well. Listen to what's going on and create a connection with your players. Or even between a drill. Do you know what, lads? Go on away, have chat time for a minute, and when we come back in and we'll focus on what we're doing. Give players choice and responsibility. And I did this with underage players, actually, whereby I said, you know what? I said, okay, here's the top 3 games you'd like to do. There's a marker. Tick which one you'd like to do tonight. Go on, you tell me. Go on, and they, oh yeah, we'd love to do this game. Okay, let's play that game. And it just sets the scene for the session, which is something small, but the players really enjoy that. Even with the older age groups, guys, you know, we're doing a kicking drill tonight. What's the one you prefer? Yeah, we like this one, Will. Or do you know, we don't like that. Okay, but you're engaging, you're involving, you're building that trust. Music in the dressing room. I was at a game at the weekend, an inter-county game. They were getting, they were in the stand, and then music while they're before they get out on the pitch to warm up. Let them pick the playlist. Again, just small things that cost nothing, but it's a progression. It's continuing what we're doing. Okay, Lynn? So what other things can we do? Involve the players. So, in the learning process, who's finding the solutions? Sometimes, I always say, who's doing the talking in your sessions, guys? Is it you, the coach, or are your players? I always say it should be 70-30. Or that's what research shows, that the coach should be talking 30%, players 70%. But think about the planning as well in terms of your questions. Who's finding the solutions? Tell me, guys, what's the issue here? What are we trying to do? You know, go away there in your small groups and have a chat about it and come back and we'll try and do better next time. You're just building that cohesion. Think about, you know, the shy girl who, she might talk in that small group. She mightn't talk in front of the big group, but she might talk in that small group. So it's just things like that to think about and how you would structure those. Meaningful feedback versus general feedback. Think about a girl who's playing your game, she wants to improve, she wants to get better. She might be the greatest team in the pitch, but she just wants to get better. So you need to give her evidence. Listen, you come here to me 6 weeks ago. You couldn't kick off your left leg, but look at you now. Wow, you kicked the score off your right leg, you know, and now off your left leg, you're really improving. Can you imagine how she feels? Builds confidence. You're building that connection, that confidence, that self-confidence, that self-competency. Simple team building games, guys. Very simple. And I tell you the ones I use. British Bulldog, tag games, whatever it may be. Might throw it into the warm-up, might throw it into the, before we go home, throwing out a fun game. Head, hands, feet, where all players, trying to snatch the ball, snatch the bacon. As simplistic as that. I always just type into the Google fun games and they come up with loads of fun games. Say, okay, how can I modify that now? I'll try it out the weekend and see how I get on. Sure, what's the worst could happen? You could flop. Sure, the players would enjoy it anyway because they'd be laughing at you because they're going, Joe, at least you tried it anyway. But even said to the players, what, next week, Mary and Joan, will you come up with a fun game there, Joe, before, go on away and think about that for the week. Things like that, just be natural about it. Don't overthink it. And that buddy system, I know, Joe, you can have new girls coming into the setup. I've tried a number of times where I knew, start of the year, there might be younger girls coming to an older group. I always say, look, forget about the session tonight. Look, Joan and Mary are new to the session. Look, will you just look after them? Just be with them. I have allocated you to other groups. Just chat to them, how they're getting on, how they're finding it. If they need any questions, any queries, will you just do that for me tonight? And don't worry about the session too much. Just so that buddy system, and particularly if you're with an academy squad, and you've loads of different clubs coming together, pair them up. I'm going to put you with Joan and Mary today. And you know what? Tell me at the end of the session 3 things that you didn't know about each other at the start of the session. Things like that just build that unity that we need. Just a few ideas. Hopefully they worked. And
that buddy system, William, as you said, is so important and like across all the teams, but even it's been really effective, particularly for a minor coming into an adult, because for an adult team, you could have adult players that's there for a long, long time. And for a minor to come into that, it can be daunting at times. So it can be really important in relation to that age group, which I know a few questions have come in on as well.
So, right, match day. Do we ever think about this now? I'm just going to throw this out there. This could be totally, over your head, or how we build resilience of a group on match day. Because we know match day is very, very, we just don't know what's going to happen. We could have all the plans in the world, but it could go out the window the minute you start the game because the team could score a goal, or, the referee could make a bad decision. You could get a player sin binned, and so how do we build this responsibility? So, when teams get tough, we get tougher. We just stay together. We stick at it. And these are just a few things I've tried out in my sessions, and I've listened to other coaches that try these things, and maybe you can try them out. So how do we treat each other on the pitch? So one team I was involved with, we were very good, but when we started losing, there was a bit of bickering going on, or that sort of stuff going on. Just say, okay, look, guys, we've identified the concern here, the issue. Why is it an issue? Because we kind of feel it's hard to deal with adversity. Okay, well, what do we need to do now to make sure that doesn't happen again? And we came up with this, I think the Irish rugby team used it, a mistake strategy. So we came up with a word that if someone makes a bad pass or gives misses a clear chance, we use a word to basically tell the player, don't worry about it, we have your back. So it could be a word. You might come up with a word yourself, come up with a team. And I was with another 12 group, and I asked them, do you know what? Come up with a word. So they came up with some word that they found very funny. Just found it very funny. So when someone made a bad pass, someone just wrote out the word, and everybody just started laughing and just moved on. Do you know? So also, too, they're going to look to you as well in terms of how you respond. So again, having that clarity as a group is just something you could try out. How do we deal with adversity in terms of what if a player gets sent off or sin binned? What if a referee makes a poor decision? What if we go down 5 points? How are we going to react? What are we going to do as a team to keep that unity and that cohesion? So you come up with these cue words or these mantras that if we got set bin, we'll say, look, we'll just say to each other, we reset and we do whatever plan we have. For someone the referee makes a poor decision, next play, move on. We can't change it, move on. And if we're down 5 points, we keep going, we never give up. They're just small things, but it's the group that comes up with these ideas. But also, you're getting the group to talk about it, to discuss it, and then you're better able as a group then to deal with the adversity that comes your way in a match day. I hope there are a few ideas there.
And I think, William, an important point you have there, it's because the team were cohesive originally before the set foot on the pitch that enabled them to trust each other in relation to this. So that's where the plan is really important, that you get to the point where all of these really fit in like a piece of a jigsaw, and they all, so like you said, your lads who just laughed when the word was put out there. So the work you do away from the pitch really makes sure that bond is strong on the pitch.
And also, Lynn, and this is the point I'm making, how do all these small things that we're highlighting here, it builds that unity, that connection, that trust within the group, that we all have each other's back, that things will get tough, but this is how we're going to deal with it as a group. And that's where really, I think that's natural. In my opinion, that's natural. And when you build natural trust within a group, I think you get 100% back when things do get tough. Yeah, you can move on there, Lynn.
And I suppose, so with that, the on the pitch stuff was very much on the pitch, but I suppose COVID taught us a lot over the last few months. And I know when things did kick in, I got contacted by a number of county captains in relation to it. They were really struggling as to how they could keep the group motivated and everything else. So we've done a lot of work, and it's stuff that works across the board, regardless of what team you're with or anything else. So these are some little strategies that you could actually do now at home virtually, but also you'll see from the ideas that we give you, if you were face to face, you could do them as well. So it's just a few little games and things. And all of these, if you type any of these into Google, you're going to find out what they are. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on them. But things like, this is about getting to know each other. So we talked about not knowing them just as you kick with your left foot or your hand past your right hand, getting to know the person behind the player. And that really helped bond them. So things like photos of your life, where the players actually went on a Zoom call or wherever you wanted to use Teams, and they had 3 photos that really recommended key points in their lives. Now, they were a bit of crack. They could have been a night out. They could have been something they were really proud of. It could have been a family one. It was up to them. And they all took it in turns to talk about this little photo. So they got to know about each other. 3 truths and a lie, something like that, with a sheet of paper. They wrote down 3 truths and a lie, and the rest of the team had to guess which one was the lie. Absolutely hilarious. And it's worse when they guessed one that was complete true and they wouldn't believe it, but it was there. Zombie game, things like thumbs up if you have. So if you were on a Teams call or a Zoom call, if we could see all your screens tonight, we could say thumbs up if you have been to the Bahamas. We'll probably, none of us been there, we won't be for a while. But everyone in the Zoom could put the thumb up and actually say it was me, or you could tell them to switch off their screens, etc. So different things that's a bit of fun, but you're getting to know about them. The bucket list challenge, and a few of the teams on this, it was great fun, where they actually got people to write down 3 things that were on a bucket list that were kind of achievable, not something like I'm going to fly to the moon 3 times before. So it was things that were on the bucket list. And what they done then was, from discussing it and going into little groups all online, a load of them had the same thing on their bucket list. So actually, they agreed that they were going to do some of these things together when they go out in it. So it was a great way of seeing, well, I never knew you wanted to do that. I wanted to do that too. The aliens have landed, again, a bit of fun. So for the aliens have landed, if you pretended we were here tonight and nobody knew what ladies football was, so you could do it for your team. If you could ask all your players to draw 3 pictures or have 3 things that represent your team. So pretending the aliens have landed and they've no idea about your club, St. Patrick's under 14s. And the only way you can describe it to the aliens is with a picture. So all of them come with pictures, and it is absolutely brilliant. And you'll guarantee you'll use them again, because it really gets you to see what is your team about, and it'll show you how cohesive they are as well as that. The Deserted Island Challenge, again, a bit of fun. If you're on a deserted island, you can put a list of stuff. So you might have a list up like this, and you're saying to them, okay, everyone can pick 3 things that you're allowed to bring off the list, and then they have to give reasons why. Again, great crack, getting to know each other. Can be done remotely, or as I said, when we're back face to face, you could do the exact same thing, sitting in a room or sitting on a pitch. And the last one, the MTV Cribs. Anyone who's seen MTV Cribs, where you get to see inside the house of a big mansion. If I turned my camera around, you're certainly not going to see a big mansion. But for some players, it was great, because they actually took their laptop or their phone around their house, got to know it, something that was a bit of crack, something quirky about the player, maybe meeting their family, and they took it in turns to actually do this remote thing. So all about getting to know the person rather than player. And these are just a few random ones, but there's loads more if you Google them.
And Niall is there about 2 stars and wish. I like that, in terms of, we'll come to that later on as well, about, what's 2 things you did well in a match and what's thing you can wish for the next game. I think that's excellent. Again,
brilliant.
The wording and how you apply it could be different to the age groups. It can be done with every age group. It's just how you go about it. Excellent. I think they're very good, actually. They're very good.
So these are said, they're just random things. And I know somebody did put up in the Q&A, how do we do these things through COVID? So, I mean, all these things can be done. And even if you have underage players, you can have a parent with the underage player. So it doesn't have to be just the underage player. If you have adults that can do it, they can actually lead this. So it doesn't always have to be you, the coach. It can be different players leading it. And you'll see from this, for how to identify strengths. And this is where people really came to the fore that you never would have thought of by giving them different things. So things like a team radio station. So they had a team radio station where they arranged that every Sunday evening they were going to meet for an hour, some of the teams. But it was up to a different player each week was going to host this pretend radio station. So they could put on whatever music, they could randomly take in some of the players they were going to interview, they could make them do their special talents. So it was all a bit of fun. But what you got, some people who you would have thought would have been the shyest player on the team turned into this like massive radio host that was able to host it and really brought out the leadership skills. Tiny campfire, you can see like the picture there of actually having little mini marshmallows. Be very careful with the age group that you're lighting these. But it was literally as if they were sitting around having a chat. And if you have things like Zoom, or I know teams are starting to bring in breakout rooms, you could actually break them into little groups and they have to come back to the big group. But they actually were sitting with little marshmallows. So it was like being on a campfire. So a bit of fun. The quizzes. You seen during the lockdown, we had our LGFA quiz. And it was gas. So even yourself to have a Kahoot quiz, and it doesn't have to be on random topics. I mean, we done ones with the rules. I had quite a few teams who done ones with the rules during lockdown. There's loads of different topics, things for your team. Maybe it's random facts about your team. And again, that can be the parent and the child working together for underage teams. And William, you done that with yours.
Yeah, we did. We used another one called Flexi Quiz, guys. Flexi Quiz was excellent. And what we did was, we did over a number of nights. It was great crack. It was just great fun. But the first night I did on our tactics. So I tested the group on tactics. Now, it was a total upside down because they didn't know the tactics, but it was a real eye opener for me that I thought they knew them. But Flexi Quiz is another one that was great crack, but it was just questions on general things and just good fun. The banter was great crack, yeah.
And even the virtual treasure hunt, I know we done that as a staff one Friday, where we literally were picking random things that they had to go and find them around the house, and the first people back were getting them. So I'd say there was plenty of tables and chairs knocked all over the place, but it was a bit of fun. A watch party, maybe you have some of your games recorded, or there's loads of upcoming championship games. So you can actually set up a watch party that maybe your whole under 16 team is sitting together watching your county on Saturday, because there's live streams left, right and centre. There's TG Cahir live coverage, or it could be your own game or a film or whatever it is. But with a watch party, you get to interact. You're not just sitting at home watching it, you have the interaction. The 30-minute challenge, so literally saying to players, three players are going to get a text 30 minutes before we go live, and it's up to you to host what you're going to do in relation to this. So again, getting their strengths in it. Can you hear me now? Where literally everyone else that was on this call might have a pen and piece of paper. I'm the only one that can see an image, or you could do a random image thing through the internet, and I have to describe to you. You have to draw away because you can't see what the picture is, and we get to see what the picture is. So in this case, it's a little fish, but it could be whatever it is. It could be something to do with your team. So it's a bit of fun. And then the World Cafe, if you want to use your breakout rooms, there could be a different topic in each of the breakout rooms. And that could be down to some of the stuff William discussed earlier. What's the stuff we've done well? What's our strengths? What's our weaknesses? So it can be very football related as well. But imagine being able to do all that, or even review the year that we're after having, which certainly was the Rapids. You could be doing that now and not necessarily having to wait on some of the stuff. So you really will see from these some leaders who you never thought you'd have will really come to the fore, and it is a bit of prop.
That's one thing I learned, Lynn, when I was doing these things. I was trying them out. A few, like, I tried them out for the crack, like, but that's right, where people, I thought, geez, I thought they were very shy, but it's amazing how people, and they're the ones who knit the whole group together and bonded the group, and the other players just enjoyed. So I think try out one or two of them over the coming weeks, lads. Try them out for the crack, sure. I think they're good fun. There's some great ideas there, Lynn.
Yes, as I said, they're all random. And then for yourself, when you're looking at your annual plan, like what sort of activities, and even some of those can be brought into face-to-face, and William had loads more there for you. And as you said, Google it, there's loads of them. But like, is there stuff you can do at training, in the middle of training, at the start, to turn up, do something different, short events? So it could be something we're actually going to meet for. I remember when I was training in the FINA, and we actually set up a little treasure hunt around the area. When they came, it literally was 2 hours one morning, and we done it. Or it can go to the other extent of actually building in a training weekend. And even the training weekend doesn't have to cost a fortune either. I mean, you can go to a host club, they might come to you again. So there's loads of different ways of actually not costing a fortune. The birth calendar, so maybe you're going to recognise all the birthdays. I know loads of teams that for everyone's birthday, there's just literally a bun and a candle in it, but they all love it, they know it. But the key thing is, if you're going to do that, don't forget somebody. Make sure you have everyone's list on it. the team building day is great fun. And I mean, there's things like a World Cup. I know when the last World Cup was happening, we actually set up the whole indoor hall in the Feen at the time into all different World Cup events. So we split them into teams. There was penalty shootouts. We actually had little table football. So it wasn't necessarily like a proper World Cup, but they were all World Cup teams. They all had a set up, and then the points was added up from their actual team. So use different events. If the Olympics was coming up, and I know as a staff we done an Olympics one for the fun one time where there was so much running, walking, swimming, everything to do with it, but they were built into teams. So just things that can be a little bit different, the team bake-offs. But the big thing is have different organisers as well. So this is where it's great if you have some younger players coming in, maybe with some older or more experience. Wouldn't it be great to actually team them up and they have to organise some of these? So that's where you're bonding. If you can build all that stuff off the pitch, imagine how they're going to stand up for each other on it. And that is a massive part of this. So the next steps for you is going to be deciding, okay, where do I fit in all this team bonding? And it's remembering, sometimes we put all this at the end, and if we've a bit of a chance, we fill in this stuff. But actually, by really making a priority of this stuff, you're going to have a far stronger team on the pitch. So that's where making sure this is part of your plans is really, really important. And that power of positivity. So you're this coach who's driving this positivity. And just before I hand you back to William, if you think of this, and this is some of the stuff I was hearing at the start of COVID, when we were talking about football, and let's face it, did any of us think we'd see a ball kicked? Realistically, club or county this year, I think we'd all say no. But what we were hearing was, there's going to be no championship this year anyway, so why are we bothering? Why are we still linking in? And we were hearing that regularly, versus other people who were saying, well, actually the priority when play returns is the championship, so how will we be ready? So in both cases, yes, they might not know if there was going to be a championship, but look at the difference in the tone of what was said in the first one versus the second one. And if you look at that quote that's actually up there, it brings it to life. When you told people they had a 90% chance of surviving surgery, 82% of patients opted for surgery. But when you told them they had a 10% chance of dying from the surgery, which was of course just a different way of putting the same odds, only 54% chose the surgery. And the reason we have upped that is you're the person who will lead the power of positivity for your club. So that's where you being the leader, you being the coach, you being positive, even if you're saying we're going to achieve X, Y, and Z, and in the back of your mind, you might not 100% believe it. If you can be positive about it, that's really going to drive off on your players. And that's where you being positive is so, so important. And William's going to bring this to life just as it'll wrap the whole thing up as we come towards the end.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up with these few slides here, guys. And I suppose it just goes back to that purpose and why do we do what we do. And here's a simple idea. So I start the year it's just simple. You know, you could change the wording and to suit whatever team you're with. But just what does it mean to represent it? You can get a Zoom call, or you can get them in a room and just ask these simple questions. What does it mean to represent your team? I've done this with under 12s, I've done this with adults, and it is really impactful in both age groups. What words do you want to associate with your team? So we want to be together. We want to, work hard. We want to show heart. There are things that you can probably just, in your team talks, in your training, you can always relate back to. If you say like, okay, we're going to be disciplined. Okay, discipline means, what does that mean? That means being on time. That means wearing the gear when we should be wearing the gear. That means, on the field of play, we're not going to give out to each other. So just those small things that just get players to think about it. As I said, it could be done underage, it could be done at a level, and how you, I suppose, go about it is the difference. And then, okay, how are we going to approach it? So what do we need to do differently than we did last year? And what are our accepted behaviours? And I go back to that point of that kind of idea of, listen, guys, if someone does step out line, this is how we're going to deal with it. But it's the group coming up with those ideas. That's just a simple thing that I've tried. But you can try it differently and put in different questions. But I would say keep it very simple in the questions you're asking. Then during the season, you probably just have to kind of every now and then, I'd say communication is key. So then will you push down there for me?
Yeah, sorry, it just froze there, William. There we are.
The purpose is key here. Communication is key. Keeping that up. It's the heart of great teamwork and doing it well enough. And going back to the point we made earlier on, when you're planning here, it shouldn't be a once-off thing. It should be something that's integrated into your training. The physical, the technical, the tactical, the psychosocial has to be part of the overall picture of our games and promote the sharing of ideas. Even in your sessions, tell me, what do you think of that drill? That feedback. Tell me, how do you solve that? and being open constructive criticism, which I go through in a few minutes. A leadership group, can be a leadership group for 2 or 3 players, where you constantly just engage with, find out how the group are finding your training, what are any concerns they have, is there anything we can do to make it better? And don't be, I don't know, do we do that enough because we're afraid of what we might hear, but don't be afraid to listen to that open, that feedback. As a coach, you should be open to that. Yeah, well, I can do that a bit better. That's a fair point. Those monthly hot wash meetings, and Honor McNamara in the DCU masterclass came up with this, and she was involved with a team, and whereby on a monthly basis, the management give the players an opportunity to say, listen guys, tell us, how are we doing? Are we doing well? What can we do better for you? You know, do we do that enough? Do you know, once a month, could be 5 minutes after training. Guys, it's the last Friday. Come on, tell us, how are things going? Be honest and be open. You know, we respect your opinion. And don't get defensive. It's okay. Just listen. Just listen. It's okay just to listen. Because the feedback is key to how you want to develop, and it builds that unity. And you're probably opening yourself up to the group going, we're all in this together. But if we're all in this together, if I'm giving you feedback, I need to be able to take feedback as well. I just think it shows that kind of unity. Regular peer reviews. So do that kind of, now it all depends on your group and what group you have and their maturity. But you know, getting the group together, I think Niall was saying earlier on about there after a game. Do you know, Mary and Joan, go over there and have a chat about the game. Joan, you give Mary your thoughts, and Mary, Joan, you give Mary her thoughts, and well, what do you do well, and you know, what do you think you can get better at? But that determines on your group. I think you're going to do this if you really have a group that are really open and feedback is very valued. So it might take time to get to there, but that'd be fantastic where the peer group are talking to each other and improving each other. And then finally, obviously, it's the end of the year, which you could be doing over the coming weeks. And Lynn talked about the wording positivity. I love the questions on here. They're very positive, but a very good review of your purpose at the end of the year. So, you know, out of all the things we did for the last 4 months, what you're proud of, make a list. What can we do better? How do we achieve that? We might have won the championship. We might have won all our games, but we actually did some good things. What were they? What are the difficulties and how do we tackle that? Okay, and how are we going to do this going forward? So I just like these words here in these sentences, a very positive spin on how you could review your year and looking forward to next year. But it's constantly going back to your purpose of why are we doing what we're doing as a group, and then write them down and get an associate with your team members and what helped you, what inspired you. So those questions are excellent. And then I suppose, what's the research saying, just to finish off? And I would ask you guys, you know, in terms of Vitex Ital, you know, they looked at the 81 factors that makes a positive environment or a fun environment in a team. And then number 41 was winning, was actually number 41. But look here, so then if you just tick it on again, look here at the top things that they highlighted as being enjoyable, being a good sport. And look at what was about supporting your teammates. And we spoke about peer-to-peer, and I know it came up in the chat there about you've got to manage that. But you need to know your players to manage that. Don't introduce something if you know they're not ready yet. So that's a very good point made. Trying hard, training hard together. They enjoy that. We worked hard tonight. That was a good session. Well done. You know, positive coaching from you. Getting improving and developing. Game support. The games, getting game time. You know, being on the field, playing in tournaments, going away and playing in tournament. Well-organized practice where, you know, I was an opportunity to give in small groups and drills and give my feedback and thought. That team friendship, having fun games, mental bonuses, as they said earlier on, team rituals and swag. Swag is wearing the gear. You know, everybody having the same gear. Wow. Joe, we got a unity here. We're part of something. We have an identity. And I just think that's very interesting. And when we show the slides afterwards and tomorrow you're reading through it, just give a read through that. I think it gives a nice summary of what we're trying to achieve tonight. That team bonding is not once off. It's not isolation. It's something that happens and it's progressive. So, Lynn, you can wrap up the night on the next few slides, but that's basically that,
Yeah, so I suppose to wrap it up, and this was very much about getting you to think about how this becomes part of the overall plan. So that's all the drills and everything you have, but it's important to look at the team bond and the team building. So imagine that we were here next year and that we were incredibly enthusiastic about the past year. And let's face it, if we can be incredibly enthusiastic about 2020, we're definitely doing something right. But what would you say happened? And I genuinely think during this year, our coaches came to the fore like never has been seen before. Absolutely phenomenal. Because not alone had they to deal with the physical aspects, but the mental aspects of players coming back from lockdowns and everything else. So what would you say happened, and what would we be excited by? So we're not asking you to write anything in this now. These are just questions to think about yourself, and to think with your team over the past year. And these could be used annually then to actually look in relation to it. This little quote: find a group of people who challenge and inspire you. Spend a lot of time with them, and it will change your life forever. This is really important because it's your part. Like, some people talk about the team and the coach. To me, the coach is the team. So you're all part of the one team, and that's really important. But also the other coaches and mentors that you involve with you. If you have one who doesn't buy into the values and what you're trying to do, it will all fall apart. And it just takes one. So really think about the people who you're building it around with you. Are they also going to challenge and inspire you? Are they going to go with you on the journey to get the best out of your players? And that is so, so important. So just before, I know we might have a few questions, and I know there's one there for William, so I'm going to fire it at him before I throw up this last one, and you can type in any other questions you have. But William, one of the questions that was there was, what age would you start doing peer reviews?
Again, that goes down to, I suppose, knowing your group and what level do you introduce that. So, you know, if you have a fairly mature underage team, say under 12, 14, and you know what, it could be very simplistic. You know what, you can tell your teammate there, you know, give him one positive thing he did or she did, then keep it like that. Keep it positive with underage. So you're saying to your teammate, tell her one good thing she did, you know, and keep it positive and have that spin at it early. But as you go up the age groups, then you can probably go into more detail and more depth. But it's really being understanding your group, what group you're with. I would, if I was the younger group, I would start that peer review, but I'd keep it very positive. Tell one good thing she did. Tell her one thing she did. And that's important, that it keeps a positive spin in it. So it's up to yourself and your group and what group you have. I would think if you're doing the underage, keep it positive. As you go up the age groups, the maturity of your players, you can then go into more, probably, okay, tell them one thing you can improve on.
Perfect. And I suppose if anyone has any questions, see
well, I just think they're why people are coming in, like, you know.
Yeah, it's just
so I just think they're like the click. Yeah, you know, they're talking about the clicks there, like, you know, like the planning is important there in terms of your planning. You know, they're talking about clicks in the group. Well, if you have good planning, I always just plan my drills of who's in what drill even. I go that level. So I'll put Mary here and Joan here and Joe, that kind of things. And the buddy system is something that's good. The cue and mantras, try out all those things. Try them out and see how they get on. Is there anything else coming through, Lynn?
There were the questions, I think, for the minute, William, and that positivity. So what I'd say to anyone is, feel free to keep adding questions, but just while you are, if you don't have a question, I suppose just if you could type in maybe one thing that you'll take from this evening's webinar. Don't worry, we'll keep an eye out on the little questions that's coming in between as well. But just if there's one thing that you'll take from this evening's webinar, and I know this is a huge area. We could be here for 3 hours, but we didn't want to do that yet. So maybe one thing that you take from it, and like we've mentioned it throughout it, there's loads of this stuff you can read up on, even the theory behind it. We didn't want to get into that. We wanted to be practical. What can you do with your team tomorrow night is what we wanted to look at. So if there's one thing that you'll take from it, maybe what it is, or a question. I don't know, William, is that there?
How to do the messing teams? Yeah, again, it goes back to your planning. Be very clever in how you organize your groups. I think that would really help. Like mantras to promote resilience. Jesus, they're coming back. They're coming through so fast now, and I can't see them. The importance of team bond and positive group. Yeah. The cue words. Yeah, try out the cue words in the mantra and let your team come up with them. As I would try out with the underage, and it really worked well for the underage team now. Really worked well. More player involvement, yeah, and that goes back to open questioning, asking TED questions. Tell me, what do you think? Explain to me what we're trying to do here. Can you just describe exactly what we're trying to do? Those TED questions will really help that.
And William, there's a question here for you, just William. How would you deal with a team where there is entitlement in some players?
So say that again.
How would you deal with a team where there is entitlement in some players?
Well, see, that's interesting. But that goes back to the culture and creating your group. I would ask the question, do the same players always start it all the time? Do you try out a scenario or a strategy whereby, Joe, you'll pick a game and Joe, you might leave your star on the bench. And you might say to her, do you know what now? For this first half, you're coming on at half time. Just give a look at your position you're coming on. Just, you know, Mix it up every now and then. Pick a game that you know, like there's no major reliance on it or anything like that. Just pick it, so that takes a sense of time that everybody here could be at the bench as well at any time. Sometimes we pick the same players all the time to start, and the same players are always on the bench. The last time I checked, and Lynn, you can let me know if there's any research done on this, I saw no players get better on the bench. I don't know, you can let me know if that has happened. But just mix it up every now and then. Maybe put a few of your star players on the bench in 1 or 2 games and try to show, listen, everybody's equal here. Everybody could be at the bench at any time. And I think sometimes that will help with that entitlement. But also too, if they're not training or not turning up, then you don't start them. But you have to stick by what you say and what you believe in. That's the key. I think a lot of us, even us, myself as coaches, we don't stick to our principles. And that sometimes leads to a lot of problems.
And I think something on that also, William, the GAA Youth Forum has happened on a number of occasions, but there's a really interesting conversation we had one day. We brought all the girls from it in it, and we were kind of talking about how difficult it can be for a team when, say, a county player comes back in, and how the other players kind of feel, oh, they're going to take my place. But actually, from the discussion, it was amazing. We had a mixture of girls who weren't county players versus girls who were. The girl who was a county player actually found it harder than anybody, because she knew she had missed some of the club training, she had missed some of the games. And sometimes you forget that maybe, and yes, she might be the star player, but how difficult is it for her to come back in? So it's really important that we actually look at on both sides in relation to it.
I see they're saying about David Clifford next week. Yeah, I suppose that's one we probably, remember what I said, pick a game, be very strategic in when you pick that game. Good point, well done. But I think just the positivity, guys, and I think all coaches tonight are doing great work, and I think it's important to note. Keep mentors motivated. Yeah, I hope you found those tips tonight. Try them out, guys. And look, you can email myself and lynn.savage@lgfa.ie or myself, william.harmon@lgfa.ie. If you want to, any thoughts on further things, or just please email us. We'd be more than happy to send on more ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, so that's brilliant. I know there's loads more coming in, but we're conscious we said we'd keep the time for you. So we will keep our promise in relation to that. Any questions is there? I think we've covered the majority of them anyway. So just before we head off, I suppose it's a massive thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight. The numbers were excellent. It's great to see. I know for a lot of people, maybe you're not getting on the pitches currently, but for the work that's been done over the last few months, we can't thank you enough, because what you've done for players, that can never be underestimated in what are difficult circumstances for everyone involved. So number one thing for us, stay safe, stay positive. We will all be back in the pitches soon, and hopefully some of the tips we give you tonight will help. So,
and also, I have myself say thank you as well. To be honest, you guys, these webinars tonight keep us motivated. I just want to say that, so thank you very much for your interaction, and best of luck over the coming weeks and months. And Joe, we'll be all back in the pitch soon again. So thanks, Lynn. Thank you very much. Well done.